How do I make it go forward? Oh. Did I do that? Okay, we're ready to go? Yeah? All right, my name is Jed Fix. I spent the summer in our favorite place in Manila in the Philippines. At least a few of you have been there already, including Anne, who lives there. This is a picture of the U.S. Embassy. So I was working in the economic section, one of 5 different sections in the State Department. But this building actually houses all of the different U.S. federal missions to the Philippines, including a list that you'll see in a minute. But my office was one of these windows over here. And it actually was an office because the deputy director of the section was out of town for a month, 2 months. So I got my own office. So this is the Manila Embassy's website, and here are the different agencies that work there. So it's Citizen and Immigration Services, Veterans Affairs, Border Protection. I mean, you can see it's a huge list. It's Peace Corps, it's Foreign Agricultural Service, the Asian Development Bank. And then within the State Department, there's the consular section, so that's where you go to get your visa. That's where American Citizen Services is housed. Public Affairs, which is the outreach. Public, I guess it's media is one section of that, and then the other is cultural affairs. So they do a lot of the kind of the local connections. The political section, so they do the trafficking in persons report, terrorism reports, human rights, religious freedoms report. And then the economic section, that's where I was, and they do more trade issues. They work with the WTO, USTR, energy sectors, FDI, and intellectual property. So there were about 5 or 6 different American Foreign Service officers there, and then they had Filipino counterparts as well. And so they worked on things like one portfolio was trade, intellectual property, and investment. Another was energy, science, and the environment. A third was education, entrepreneurship. They keep tabs on export, what do they call it? Export controls. It's like nuclear material. And then domestic air transit. So that just gives you a feel for what was happening in that area. So what did I actually do? Well, I went to a number of events. This is an event hosted at the National Police Headquarters by the Intellectual Property Organization. It was called Ceremonial Destruction of Counterfeit Goods. And you'll see why in a minute. This is my supervisor. Her name is Jen Neidhart. She's got a PhD in International Affairs, I think, from American University, and she was incredibly welcoming, gave me a lot of support and direction and time, extremely generous. I'm indebted to her. But she was invited to speak at this event as well, so you can see sort of the podium area. There's some stuff down here. You'll get a closer look at that in a minute, and then here's the crowd. Here's the media as well. Here's the director of the Intellectual Property Organization. And so what they've done is they've actually set up counterfeit faked goods. Anything from textbooks to Gucci purses to DVDs, and they're ceremonially destroying them right now. And so she's getting ready, I think, to cut through a couple of Gucci purses with a big machete. That was one of the events, and that's one of the events I got to take part in. And you can see the glee on these guys' face. You can also see this is the same guy right here. Now he's hanging on the side of a tank. So they've piled up DVDs on the street, and they're running them over with the tank. And they didn't just run them over once either. It was like, you guys have been doing that for 10 minutes, just back and forth. Also, trips. This is a trip to one of the other larger cities where we visited the mayor's office, a TIP forum, some Peace Corps sites, and then the EPZ, the Export Processing Zone. So I got to be part of one of these official trips. There were a number of them over the course of the summer. The ambassador was new. He's actually this gentleman here from Queens, Harry Thomas. And so he was doing his best to get out and meet people and see what was happening, which meant that we were busy preparing for him to get out and meet people. That meant writing a lot of briefing reports and kind of getting to know our contacts better. On top of that, the Philippines just elected a new president. Elected a week before I got there, inaugurated a few weeks later. So he was busy, and the government was busy appointing new appointees, so new people to run the different public administrations. So we spent quite a bit of time getting to know them as well. Well, this is just on the tarmac. Here's some more pictures from that day's events. I mean, you can see the little plane that we took down here, and it's all very, diplomatic. This is a meeting with the mayor, and then here's the ambassador presenting at a summit on trafficking in persons. They host a lot of, again, diplomatic events. This is the 4th of July celebration, so it's an enormous event that takes weeks to get ready for, and it's very elaborate and well done. But more than anything, it's a chance for everybody to gather their contacts together to kind of thank them, and then also to do a bit of schmoozing and networking. I think I'm in here somewhere.
By the left, above the left.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's me. This guy right here, you probably don't recognize. I didn't recognize either. He was the newly elected vice president. I don't know how they let him get so close to me. And there's another story to go along with that, but I'll tell you. Okay, so he was standing there, and when we were raising these cords to make way for the flag bearers, he was actually standing on the carpet. So I said, "Sir, would you mind taking a step back?" And then I found out later he was the vice president, and that you're not supposed to say that to the vice president. You're supposed to ask the vice president's aide to say it to the vice president. So these are the lessons of diplomacy. Basketball games as well. So you can see it's well attended, a professional basketball game here. And then the International Center for Pig Husbandry as well. So what do you think this is? Any guesses? No, it's the opposite. That's where all the manure goes. And we were interested in it because they have this apparatus set up to gather up the methane from the pig stuff and then to use it for cooking. Let's see, biosecurity, biohazard. So he was the energy and environment officer, and he was interested in this as an example of renewable energy. And the State Department might be interested in sponsoring a program to deal with this. And then work, so it's lots of trips. You've seen that part. But for work itself, I probably spent half the time actually in the office. Writing briefing papers, a lot of them were on subjects I didn't feel like I knew that much about, so I'd end up doing quite a bit of research. That meant internet searches, but it also meant going through our old files and then talking with local staff members too to get an idea who certain individuals were. So oftentimes people that like my supervisor or the ambassador were going to meet with, business people, often politicians, so forth. Cables. So cables are, I didn't know this before I went there, but that's like the internal way of sharing information. So it's a memo or like a formalized State Department report that make their way back to Washington, D.C. So I read more of those and then also got to write one. Just sort of administrative tasks, put together a conference on intellectual property and trip prep. Shadowing, so spending hours or a day or two at the consular section, at the political section, at the ICE. I don't know what that is. Oh yeah, Immigration and Customs. And then just accompanying my supervisor to meetings with the Department of Trade and Industry, Boeing, Delta, and then visiting the other mission agencies too. It's amazing how far and how quickly you can get a meeting when you have an embassy business card. I mean, people really, they're happy to accommodate you. But got to see some of the projects that USAID was working on, the Foreign Agricultural Service, Foreign Commercial Service, and then a little bit the Department of Justice. And then I got to do some independent research on like migration and remittances, stuff that kind of helped inform a Fulbright proposal. I'll just show you a few pictures to end of the city. So that's Manila. That's also Manila. They did provide housing, although it wasn't paid. Lived in 2 different spots. One was sort of a Southern California-esque housing compound. You can see there. They're actually, this picture is interesting because the townhouses are on the left side, and then they're building a new VA hospital on the right side, and it'll be the first and only VA hospital outside of the United States, and that's in part because there are a lot of Americans that retire to the Philippines, old service people, but also because there are a lot of Filipino Americans who fought for the United States during, I guess, World War II and maybe the Korean War. Anyway, there's a lot of interchange between the two. So there are enough people there, enough American citizens who need these services that they're setting up a hospital there. And then later got moved to just kind of a townhouse in the high-res. Beautiful, wonderful country, super, super friendly people. People are incredibly hospitable, really nice. Beaches and mountains. This was neat. So actually that first area we saw where they were running the DVDs over with the tank was the site of the People's Revolution of 1986, something that Dr. Schwalbenberg could tell you more about, but that was when Marcos was overthrown, right? And that's it. Any questions? I guess I didn't ask if anybody's interested in doing a State Department internship. Yeah, a couple, maybe. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was interested either, but I found it really interesting. I don't know if I'd want to go into it, but it was great to just, I guess because I was coming from like a Peace Corps persuasion, I'm more interested in like the NGO sector, but it was neat to see how things operate on a much, much higher level. And very informative too. I think it'll make me have a better, more well-rounded, and like a better aid worker. Yeah?
Was this the kind of thing that you had to apply for your first semester, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Part of the reason why I described the different mission agencies to you is just so you get an idea of kind of what is happening with the federal government overseas and how that can hopefully inform your decisions about where to apply for internships. Yeah, it's coming up soon. It's in the next month, so you definitely want to check the website. The application's really, really easy. You don't need recommendations, and you might write a cover letter, but it doesn't take so much time. I'd really encourage you to apply, even if you don't think it's quite up your alley. I was surprised to get it. It seems a little bit arbitrary, but that being said, like, go ahead and put a resume in. Yeah.
What was the process like from the time you put in the application?
Yeah, I put it in and then forgot about it, honestly, and was surprised to get this email in early January that was very short and said something like, "You've been selected for an internship." It was like one line at the beginning. And then it goes on to describe the security clearance process in 3 or 4 paragraphs. The security clearance takes much longer than the application itself. It's 65 pages. So I actually didn't find out where I was going until after I'd started the security process. It was probably a month later, like a packet that arrived in the mail. And I think at that point they'd said economic section, Philippines, but I had to like look online and find somebody's contact information and call them, and they hadn't coordinated very well with Washington, D.C. at that point, so they were surprised to hear from me early, but it made me feel more comfortable because it was more formal. Like I kind of knew I had somebody's name and I sort of knew what I was getting into. They were able to give me a better idea of what I was in for. And then by March, I was in touch with my supervisors, so starting to line out some projects. They gave me a lot of flexibility. Like they made it very clear that they wanted somebody who was going to pursue their own interests as well. Any other questions? Yeah? Really, you guys should think about applying. It's pretty neat, pretty good deal. Pass it off to Whitney.
Yeah.
Not Whitney.